Thank you, Senator Coons. And I'd like to go back briefly to Mr. Mair. In your written testimony, you said that the science behind climate change and its effect on minority communities, quote, should not be up for debate. I'm curious, is the Sierra Club, is this a frequent practice to declare areas of science not up for debate, not up for consideration of what the evidence and data show?
If you are relying on the evidence and data, you know, the science, the preponderance of the evidence are there.
But that's a different thing than saying we should not debate a question, that the Sierra Club has declared this scientific issue resolved and there should be no debate.
Based upon the preponderance of the evidence, the science is settled, but the thing is that anything is up for debate, Senator. We can debate anything.
Well, you know, I would note that even the phrase preponderance of the evidence, having been a practicing lawyer for many years, means 51%. That means at least 51% is what the preponderance means. You know, I would ask, for example, if you want to end debate, you don't want to address the facts, how do you address the fact that in the last 18 years, the satellite data show no demonstrable warming whatsoever?
Sir, I would rely upon the Union of Concerned Scientists, and I would rely upon the evidence, and again, from our own NOAA officials, the data are there.
President of the Sierra Club, Aaron Mair, does not answer the question. In Mair's defense, he's not a climate scientist, nor is his role as president of the Sierra Club a scientific one. Nevertheless, a more direct answer to the question could have been, I don't know, I'm not a climate scientist. If you want to know how the data you refer to is integrated in the projections made by climate scientists, you should ask someone who specializes in that area.
Is it correct that the satellite data over the last 18 years demonstrate no significant warming?
No.
How is it incorrect?
Based upon our experts, it's been refuted long ago, and it's not up for scientific debate.
A better answer would have been, I don't know. I am relying on the expert opinions of climate scientists. He had rightly retracted his statement that science should not be up for debate. He is mistaken for repeating the idea that he just retracted. But he is correct that the evidence is conclusive. Although he is not a climate scientist, he does have a scientific background, having studied sociology and worked in epidemiology. So it is disappointing that he did not give an answer like this. Climate science relies on multiple data sets from multiple measuring techniques using converging methods. So the data from the single set of measurements you refer to do not contravene the findings from all of the data sets combined.
I'm curious if, I want to understand this. I do find it highly interesting that the president of the Sierra Club, when asked what the satellite data demonstrate about warming, apparently is relying on staff. So it's
just a mistake.
The nice thing about the satellite data is these are objective numbers.
Correct.
And the numbers over the last 18 years, are you familiar with the phrase, the pause?
The answer is yes, and essentially we rest on our position.
And to what you said, you are familiar with the pause, so to what does the phrase the pause refer? I'm sorry, you said you were familiar with that term, so I asked to what does it refer?
Essentially, it's the slowing in global warming during the 40s, sir.
During the 40s? Is it not the term that global warming alarmists have used to explain the inconvenient truth, to use a phrase popularized by former Vice President Al Gore, that the satellite data over the last 18 years demonstrate no significant warming whatsoever? Global warming alarmists call that the pause because the computer models say there should be dramatic warming, and yet the actual satellites taking the measurement don't show any significant warming.
False. Apparently by alarmists, he means scientists. According to NASA, the pause was not a leveling off of warming, but rather during the years 1998 to 2012, the atmosphere was thought to be warming at a slower rate than it had been previously, but still warming. This Senate hearing occurred in October 2015. Cruz and Mair are apparently unaware that several months prior to this hearing in June, a study was published demonstrating there was no pause. The appearance of a pause was due to the fact that in the mid-70s, researchers started using a new method to measure sea surface temperature. The new method recorded different temperatures than the old method. When the difference between the two methods is accounted for, we see that warming is occurring in the early 21st century as fast or faster than in the later half of the 20th century. There's a link in the description to the NASA article describing this.
But, Senator, 97% of the scientists concur and agree that there is global warming.
It should be noted that some surveys show lower percentages of climate scientists making this claim. But it still stands that the majority of climate scientists agree on three things. 1, the climate is growing warmer. 2, the change is caused at least in part by human activity. 3, this trend has harmful consequences for people.
And anthropogenic impact with regards to
the problem with that statistic that gets cited a lot is it's based on one bogus study.
2 studies actually get to 97%, although only one was published in a peer-reviewed journal. One study was in terms of the percentage of scientists, the second in the percentage of publications. Both papers can be criticized for methodology. But bogus? If Cruz has evidence of fraud, he should produce it. Otherwise, that's a bogus claim.
And indeed, your response, I would point that your response is quite striking. I asked about the science and the evidence, the actual data. We have satellites. They're measuring temperature. That should be relevant. And your answer was, pay no attention to your lying eyes and the numbers that the satellites show. Instead, listen to the scientists who are receiving massive grants who tell us, do not debate the science.
Senator Cruz is suggesting that money is influencing scientists to publish studies that are not relying on empirical data. That is an accusation of fraud. Scientists who work in the private sector, like the tobacco industry or the fossil fuel industry, may have an interest in skewed results. But scientists who work in academia or for government agencies are rewarded based on the accuracy of their findings. If Senator Cruz has evidence of fraud or even conflict of interest in the field of climate science, he should produce it. Otherwise, he is the fraud. And one can easily wonder if the fact that Cruz's campaign has received over $951,000 from the fossil fuel industry between 2011 and 2014 might be influencing his denial of science.
Sir, this is one of the national pastimes in America, and while we're debating what 97% of scientists have already settled, the 3% that we, as I say, have invested in with regards to the carbon industry, our planet is cooking and heating up and warming. So this is one of the reasons why.
So hold on a second. It is the Sierra Club's position that right now the Earth is cooking up and heating and warming. Is that the Sierra Club's? I mean, I just want to quote you and understand.
I am saying I concur with 97% of the world's scientists with regards to global warming and the anthropogenic effects of mankind with regards to climate.
But sir, would you answer the question? Is it the Sierra Club's position, as you just testified, that the Earth is cooking up and heating and warming right now? Is that the Sierra Club's position?
Global temperatures are on the rise, sir.
And I assume the Sierra Club would issue a public retraction if confronted with the facts that the data are precisely as I described, that over the last 18 years, there has been no significant warming, and indeed, that is why global warming alarmists invented the term the pause to explain what they call the pause in global warming, because the data demonstrate what you just said, that the Earth is cooking and warming is not backed up by the data.
We are concurring with 97% of the scientists that absolutely say the opposite, sir.
So if the data are contrary to your testimony, would the Sierra Club issue a retraction?
Sir, we concur with the 97% scientific consensus with regards to global warming.
Mair is not answering the question. Of course, there is a good answer here. If the data were to indicate that the climate is not warming, I will change my conclusions. I only wish someone would ask Senator Cruz the same question. There is a reason Senator Cruz is referring to 18 years. 1998 was an unusually hot year. And if he had referred to temperature rather than warming, he would have a point. Average temperatures had gone down from 1998 to the date of this hearing. In research parlance, this is called the problem of limited range. It is similar to cherry picking. It means you only look at one part of a data set instead of all the relevant data. Because if you look at the data from almost any other year, temperatures are rising. But what is more notable is that Senator Cruz fails to account for the fact that temperature and heat are not the same thing. It is crucial to understand the difference between the two in any conversation on climate change. Explaining that difference would be a subject for another video, but there is a link in the description to an explanation. Melting ice caps and glaciers and rising sea levels demonstrate an increase in heat, not all of which is represented by an increase in temperature. Even if we isolate that 18-year period in which average temperatures do not rise, the Earth is still warming in that period in the sense that it is absorbing more heat.
I'd like to repeat, certainly in a moment, but I'd like to repeat the question and get an answer. If the data are contrary to your testimony, would the Sierra Club issue a retraction?
We concur with 97% of the scientists that believe that the anthropogenic impacts of mankind with regards to global warming are true.
So does that mean you're not willing to answer the question?
We can concur with the preponderance of the evidence and the science at 97%. You're asking me if we take the 3% over the 97%?
No, I'm actually not asking about a survey among scientists. I'm asking about the objective data, the numbers.
The scientists rely upon their objective data and their analysis, and 97% have concurred and conclude that global warming is indeed a fact.
You know, Mr. Mair, I find it striking that for a public policy organization that purports to focus exclusively on environmental issues, that you're not willing to tell this committee that you would issue a retraction if your testimony is objectively false under scientific data. That undermines the credibility of any organization if you will persist in a political position regardless of what the science shows, regardless of the facts, regardless of the evidence, and regardless of the data. That is not consistent, I would suggest, with sound public policy.
I concur.
Sir, you can pick whatever, choose and cherry pick whatever data you wish, but I concur with the 97% of scientists who concur that global warming is a fact.
Senator Cruz.
It is unfortunate that Aaron Mair does not explain very well why it's a good idea to accept that science is usually right. Whose word do you take on scientific matters? A scientist or a politician? When you are sick, do you visit a doctor or a politician? For all the problems of medical science being influenced by the pharmaceutical industry, the profession is making an honest effort to do objective research. They have procedures in place for controlling for bias. On the other hand, politicians have no procedures in place to control for bias. During the last presidential election in 2012, the pharmaceutical industry donated $21.8 million. Pharmaceutical contributions in the present election, as of March 2016, are estimated at $8.4 million, $378,000 of which went to Ted Cruz. And who do you turn to if you want to know objectively what U.S. citizens believe on any particular topic? Politicians? Or social scientists like the ones who work at Pew or Gallup or any number of sociology departments in U.S. universities? Social scientists systematically select representative samples and perform inferential statistics. How many politicians do that? So if you want to know about climate science, ask a climate scientist, not Ted Cruz or Aaron Mair. Science relies upon empirical observations, makes hypotheses that are testable and falsifiable, forms theories that can make predictions, and on the basis of these predictions, theories can be confirmed, falsified, or modified. We can only speculate how Ted Cruz goes about his decision-making process, but some hypotheses are more plausible than others.